The Duke of Renfield had been standing in the rose beds for nearly 3 hours, and his back was starting to ache in a way it never had before. The sun hung high over Belmere House, warm and bright, casting soft gold over the wide green lawns, where silk dresses drifted like moving flowers. Laughter floated through the air, light and careless, as if the world held no troubles at all. Marcus Hadley, Duke of Renfield, pressed one dirt-stained hand against his lower spine and slowly straightened, but no one looked at him. Not a single person. Ladies passed by with their lace parasols tilted just right to guard their skin from the sun. Their eyes slid over him as if he were part of the hedge itself. To them, he was only a gardener. He had planned it that way. He wore his oldest shirt, the one with the frayed collar that his valet hated. His trousers were borrowed from the head groundskeeper and still damp at the knees from the morning watering, and he had rubbed soil into his forearms and left a shadow of stubble along his jaw. He looked like a working man. He smelled like one too. And he watched. Lady Caroline Blythe dropped her handkerchief near the fountain. It landed just beside him. She paused, clearly waiting for him to pick it up. When he did not rush to her side, she snapped her fingers and called for a footman instead. Her gaze never even touched his face, and the Ashworth twins knocked over a potted lavender and stepped around the spilling dirt without a word. Miss Victoria Winters murmured, "Mind yourself," when he moved a wheelbarrow from her path, but she did not truly see him either. Her eyes passed through him like light through glass. Marcus felt something heavy settle inside his chest. He had arranged this entire gathering. He had persuaded Lord Belmere to invite every eligible young woman from 3 counties. He needed to marry. Oh, his estate demanded it. His family expected it. His mother insisted upon it in letters written with sharp ink and sharper words. But Marcus wanted something more than a polite alliance. He wanted truth. His sister Catherine had warned him that people would only disappoint him. She had said the world worked the way it worked, and that power shaped behavior. But Marcus believed somewhere there must be one woman who would treat a gardener as a human being. So he worked. He cut roses and wiped sweat from his brow. His hands, soft from a life of privilege, began to sting with blisters. The sun burned against his neck. Still, no one spoke to him. He began to think Catherine had been right. Then he heard a voice. "Excuse me, sir." He looked up. She stood at the edge of the gravel path, shading her eyes from the sun. Her dress was pale green muslin, simple and worn soft with use. No jewels sparkled at her throat, only a small cameo, and her dark hair was pinned up neatly without fuss. She was not the kind of beauty painters chased. Her nose was a little too strong, her mouth a bit too wide, but her eyes were clear and steady and very much alive. "Yes, miss," Marcus said carefully. "You have been working since morning," she said. "I saw you when I arrived." He blinked. She had noticed him. "It is my work, miss." "Yes, but it is terribly hot, and I have not seen you take any water." She held out a tin cup. Cold drops of moisture clung to its sides. "I thought you might need this." Marcus stared at the cup as if it were something precious. Their fingers brushed when he took it. He felt calluses on her palm. The water tasted faintly of lemon. It was cool and bright and went straight to his head. He had not realized how thirsty he truly was. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It is only decent," she replied with a small smile, "though that seems in short supply today." There was no cruelty in her tone, only simple observation. "I am Rosalind Thorne," she added. The name meant nothing to him, which told him everything. She was not from the grand families his mother admired. "I am Thomas," he said after a pause, using his middle name. Well, Thomas, you are doing a lovely job with the roses. She glanced back at the gathering crowd. I should return before my cousin worries. She means well. She always thinks I must meet people. I am rather poor at it. You seem to be doing fine, he replied. Rosalind laughed softly. I hid in the library for an hour. He found himself smiling. Will you attend the dinner tomorrow evening? He asked without thinking. Oh no, that is for important guests. I am only here for the day. There was no bitterness in her voice, only acceptance. Goodbye, Thomas, she said gently. Try to stay in the shade. He watched her walk back to the others, but she stood slightly apart from them as if she belonged, and yet did not. Marcus gripped his pruning shears tightly. He had found her, the one person who had seen him when he was invisible, and he had lied. That night, Marcus stood in his chambers, staring at his fine coat and polished boots. The formal dinner would be held in his honor. Every woman who ignored him in the garden would smile brightly when he entered as the Duke of Renfield. But Rosalind would not be there. He could not bear the thought of sitting at that table, pretending ignorance. I am not going, he told his valet. The man did not question him, but surprise flickered in his eyes. Instead, Marcus requested information. A woman named Rosalind Thorne, cousin to Margaret Belmere, find where she lives. Quietly. Dukes did not chase unknown women, but Marcus was done doing what dukes were expected to do. 2 days later, the bell above a small bookshop door chimed. Rosalind looked up from her ledger. The pen slipped from her fingers. Thomas stood in the doorway. Except he was not Thomas. His coat was perfectly tailored. His boots shone like mirrors. His hair was cut properly, his face cleanly shaved. But his eyes were the same. You are not a gardener, she said. Number. He removed his hat slowly. My name is Marcus Hadley. I am the Duke of Renfield. The shop felt smaller at once. She should have been furious. She knew that. He had tested her. Lied to her. Why, she asked quietly. I needed to see them as they truly are. When they thought no one important was watching, they all failed. Until you. I only brought you water. Exactly. He stepped closer. When I am a duke, people perform for me. With you, I was simply a man. You deceived me. I know. And I am sorry. That is why I am here as myself. No more lies. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. I have thought about nothing but you, he continued. I skipped the dinner. I searched for you. I had to tell you the truth, even if you send me away. Rosalind studied him carefully. She saw nervousness beneath the polished exterior. I am a shopkeeper, she said. I live above this store. I have ink on my fingers and no grand fortune. I do not want a fortune. I want honesty. People will talk. Let them. He reached for her hand slowly. I choose you, he said. If you will have me. She hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. I am still angry about the lie. That is fair, and I do not know how one courts a duke. Neither do I, he admitted with a small smile. She laughed softly. Outside, the town carried on as always, but inside that quiet bookshop, something bold and dangerous had begun. A duke had searched for truth in a garden, and found it in a woman who offered water to a stranger. The morning after the Duke walked into her shop, Rosalind woke before sunrise, with a strange mix of hope and fear sitting heavy in her chest. For years, her life had followed a quiet pattern. She opened the shop at 8. She counted coins carefully. She sorted book and wrapped parcels. She climbed the narrow stairs at night and read by lamplight until sleep found her. Nothing grand, nothing wild. Now, everything felt unsteady. Marcus Hadley, Duke of Renfield, He had kissed her hand among stacks of dusty novels and spoken of choosing her as if it were the simplest thing in the world, as if choosing a shopkeeper over a ballroom full of silk gowns were no more difficult than selecting a book from a shelf. Rosalind stood at her small window and looked down at the empty street. The bakery across the way had not yet opened. The air was cool and gray. It felt like the calm before a storm. By noon, the storm arrived. The bell above her door rang sharply, and 2 women stepped inside. They wore fine gloves and carried the scent of expensive perfume. Rosalind recognized one of them from the garden party, Miss Victoria Winters. The other woman leaned close to her friend and whispered something that made them both smile. "Good afternoon, Miss Thorne," Victoria said, in a voice too sweet to be real. "We heard you have made quite an impression lately." Rosalind set down the book she had been wrapping. "If you are looking for a particular title, I would be happy to help." "We are not here for books," the second woman said softly. "We are here because the Duke of Renfield paid you a visit." The words fell like stones. Rosalind held their gaze. He did. Victoria tilted her head. How surprising that His Grace would spend time in such a modest place. Rosalind felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she did not look away. "He is free to spend his time where he pleases." "Of course," Victoria said smoothly. "Well, we only hope you understand the difference between kindness and ambition." The meaning was clear. They believed she had trapped him. "I offered a man water in a garden," Rosalind said calmly. "If that is ambition, then the world is stranger than I thought." The women exchanged a glance. Their smiles faded slightly. Without another word, they turned and left. When the door shut behind them, Rosalind allowed herself a slow breath. It had begun. That evening, Marcus arrived again, and he did not come in a grand carriage this time. He walked. His coat was still fine, but he carried himself with less formality, as if trying to bridge the space between their worlds. "You have visitors today," he said quietly after greeting her. "News travels fast," she replied. "I am sorry. Do not apologize for other people's small minds." Marcus smiled faintly. "That is one of the many reasons I admire you." Rosalind moved around the counter and faced him fully. "This will not be easy. I never expected easy. Your mother will hate me." "She hates most things," he said lightly, then grew serious. "Yes, she will object, and society will whisper. Let them whisper until they grow tired. You say that now. I say it because I mean it." He reached for her hand again, but this time she did not give it at once. "Marcus, do you truly understand what this means? You live in estates and ballrooms. I live above a shop. I mend my own dresses. I argue about book prices with students who cannot pay full coin." He stepped closer. "And I envy you for it." She blinked. "You have built something that is yours. Everything I have was handed to me before I could walk. I want a life that feels chosen, not assigned." His honesty shook her more than grand promises would have. A soft knock interrupted them. Margaret Belmere stepped inside. Her expression held worry and curiosity in equal measure. "Rosalind, I heard the most astonishing rumor," she began, then saw Marcus standing there. Marcus bowed politely. "Mrs. Belmere." Margaret looked between them slowly. "So it is true." "Yes," Rosalind said. Margaret studied her cousin's face carefully. "Are you happy?" The question cut through everything else. Rosalind glanced at Marcus. His eyes held no pressure, only quiet hope. "I think I might be," she answered honestly. Margaret's shoulders relaxed. Then that is what matters. Though I warn you both, London will not be so kind. Marcus straightened. I do not intend to hide her. Margaret's brows lifted. You would present her openly? Yes. The room went still. Rosalind felt fear twist inside her stomach. A public appearance meant exposure, judgment, mockery, but it also meant truth. There is a charity gala in 2 weeks at the Renfield estate, Marcus continued. My mother expects me to attend. I would like you to come with me. As what? She asked softly. As the woman I am courting. Margaret let out a small breath. Rosalind's heart pounded. 2 weeks was not long enough to prepare for battle. People will watch every step I take. Then I will walk beside you. They will measure my dress and my speech. Then we will give them nothing to measure but our honesty. Margaret stepped forward and took Rosalind's hands. If you choose this, I will stand with you, but you must be strong. Rosalind looked at Marcus again. He did not look like a duke in that moment. He looked like a man asking for trust. I will come, she said. His relief was clear and bright. Thank you. Over the next days, the town buzzed. Customers entered her shop, pretending to browse while studying her face. A few offered polite congratulations. Others gave thin smiles that held hidden questions. Marcus visited often, sometimes bringing books he claimed to need help understanding, while he listened when she spoke. He laughed easily. He asked about her father and the debts she had paid one by one. He treated her small shop as if it were a palace. Yet beneath their growing closeness lay tension. One afternoon, as they walked along the river road outside town, Rosalind finally spoke the fear she had been holding. What if I disappoint you? He stopped walking. That is impossible. It is not. What if you grow tired of defending me? What if your world pulls you back? Marcus stepped closer. Rosalind, I have lived in that world my entire life. It has never once felt like mine. You feel like mine. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. Then promise me something. Anything. If this becomes too heavy, if it begins to crush you, you will tell me the truth. I promise. He kissed her gently beside the quiet river, not with grand passion, but with steady certainty. 2 weeks later, the carriage stood waiting outside her shop. Rosalind wore a new gown Margaret had insisted on buying. It was simple cream silk, elegant, but not loud. She had tried to style her hair in the fashion of London, but it still felt like her own. Marcus stepped down from the carriage and offered his hand. Ready? He asked. No, she admitted. Good. Neither am I. She placed her hand in his. As the carriage rolled toward Renfield Estate, the grand house rose in the distance like something from a dream. Tall windows, sweeping lawns, rows of carriages lining the drive. Music drifted through open doors. Rosalind's breath caught. This was not a garden party. This was war. Marcus squeezed her hand once before helping her down. The doors opened. Inside, heads turned. Whispers began at once. The Duke of Renfield had arrived, and beside him stood a woman no one recognized, a shopkeeper, a girl in a simple gown who had once handed water to a gardener. Marcus lifted his chin and led her forward. Across the ballroom, a tall woman in dark satin stood very still. His mother, and the look in her eyes promised that the real battle had only just begun. The music did not stop when they entered, but it softened. Conversations lowered into whispers that moved across the ballroom like wind through dry leaves. Every eye seemed to follow them as Marcus guided Rosalind down the polished floor of Renfield Estate. The chandeliers above cast warm light over silk gowns and polished boots. Jewels sparkled at throats and wrists. The air smelled of perfume and candle wax. Rosalind felt very small, but Marcus's hand around hers was steady. At the far end of the room stood the Duchess of Renfield. She was tall and straight as a blade. Her dark gown was cut in the latest London fashion. Diamonds rested at her neck like ice. Her face showed no smile. Marcus stopped before her and bowed slightly. "Mother." The Duchess's gaze slid to Rosalind. "And this must be the young lady who has caused such excitement." Her voice was smooth and cool. Rosalind dipped into a polite curtsy. "Your Grace. A shopkeeper, I hear." "Yes, Your Grace." The Duchess studied her from head to toe. Not cruelly, not kindly, simply measuring. "You understand that life beside a duke is not simple," she said. "I do," Rosalind replied quietly. "Do you, truly?" The Duchess's eyes sharpened. "Because marriage into this family is not about romance. It is about duty, appearances, legacy." Marcus stepped forward. "It is also about happiness." The Duchess's jaw tightened slightly. "Happiness is a luxury." "Then perhaps it is time we claim it," Marcus answered. A faint murmur rippled through the nearby guests. The Duchess held her son's gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to Rosalind. "Tell me, Miss Thorne, why should I believe your interest in my son is sincere?" The question was sharp, but honest. Rosalind felt fear press against her ribs. She could lie. She could say something charming and careful. Instead, she spoke plainly. "Because I did not know he was your son when I first met him." Silence fell. "I thought he was a gardener. I offered him water because he looked tired, not because he was important. When he came to my shop later and told me the truth, I was angry. I did not welcome him with dreams of riches. I questioned him." The Duchess's eyes flickered. "I live in 2 small rooms above my store. I have no grand fortune. I have no powerful family. If I wish to climb in society, there are easier ways than arguing with a duke in front of my ledger books." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Rosalind lifted her chin. "I care for your son because he stood in my shop and asked for honesty instead of admiration. Because he chose to come as himself, not as a title." The Duchess was very still. Marcus watched his mother with open hope. Finally, the Duchess spoke. "You are not afraid of me." "I am a little afraid," Rosalind admitted. "But I will not pretend to be someone I am not." For the first time, something changed in the older woman's expression. Not warmth, not yet, but something close to respect. "Very well," she said quietly. "We shall see how you manage under brighter lights." The music swelled again, as if released from a held breath. Marcus let out a slow exhale. "May I have this dance?" he asked Rosalind. "You may." They stepped onto the floor. Whispers followed them. Some mocking, some curious, some thoughtful. Marcus placed one hand at her waist and took her other in his. "You were extraordinary," he murmured. "I was terrified." "I know." They moved through the waltz carefully at first. Rosalind focused on the steps, on not stumbling, on keeping her back straight. But as the dance continued, something unexpected happened. People began watching not with scorn, but with interest. She did not cling nervously. She did not lower her eyes in shame. She met gazes directly. She smiled when spoken to. She answered questions without flattery. She was simply herself. When the dance ended, a few older guests nodded politely. One gentleman even bowed with quiet approval. The evening passed in waves of tension and small victories. Lady Victoria Winters approached with a stiff smile. "How brave of you to attend," she said. "How kind of you to notice," Rosalind replied calmly. Victoria had no answer for that. Later, as supper was served, the Duchess observed everything from her place at the head table. She saw her son laughing genuinely. She saw Rosalind speak warmly to the staff, thanking a nervous footman who nearly spilled wine. She saw something she had not expected: joy. When the final song ended and guests began to depart, the Duchess approached them once more. "Walk with me," she said to Rosalind. Marcus tensed, but his mother gave him a look that told him to remain where he was. They stepped onto the terrace, where cool night air replaced the heavy scent of perfume. The moon hung bright above the estate. "You love him," the Duchess said without turning. "Yeah. And you understand that loving a man like my son means sharing his burdens, his responsibilities." "I do." The Duchess folded her hands. "I raised Marcus to place duty above all else. I believed affection would follow later. Perhaps I was wrong." Rosalind waited quietly. "You have already changed him," the older woman continued. "He defied expectations tonight. For you." "He defied them for himself," Rosalind said softly. The Duchess looked at her carefully. "You are not what I imagined for him." "I know. But perhaps," she added slowly, "you are what he needs." Relief flooded through Rosalind so suddenly she almost swayed. "This is not approval," the Duchess said firmly. "It is permission to try. That is more than I hoped for." When they returned inside, Marcus searched Rosalind's face anxiously. "Well, your mother is formidable," he smiled faintly. "That is not news, but she did not forbid me from standing beside you." His eyes brightened. "Then there is hope." "There is." The last of the guests left. The grand hall grew quiet. Marcus led her to the wide doors at the front of the estate. The night air felt fresh and open. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Coming here, facing them." Rosalind looked back at the towering house, at the place that once seemed impossible. "No." She turned to him. "Because I was never invisible tonight." He stepped closer. "Neither was I." He took her hands gently. "The first time we met, you gave water to a gardener." She smiled. "And now you stand beside a duke," he finished. "No," she corrected softly. "I stand beside Marcus." Emotion flickered across his face. "I cannot promise this will always be easy." "I do not want easy," she said. "I want true." He pulled her into his arms beneath the moonlight. This kiss was not hidden among dusty shelves or whispered in a small shop. It was open and certain and brave. Inside the estate, servants watched with quiet smiles. Across the countryside, whispers would continue. Some would fade, some would grow, but none of it mattered. Because a duke once chose to stand in a garden disguised as a gardener, and a woman with ink on her fingers chose to offer kindness. From that simple act, something stronger than status had grown. Not a fairy tale built on wealth, but a love built on seeing one another clearly. And in a world ruled by titles and expectations, that was the rarest treasure of all.